Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta nueva jornada del Encuentro Internacional de Investigación sobre Cine Chileno y Latinoamericano, que ya está en su 11ª versión. Y hoy nos convoca el segundo coloquio de preservación y restauración digital que organiza la Cineteca Nacional de Chile en el marco de este encuentro, porque quisimos también darle un giro, ¿no? Un foco en la preservación, dado que es necesario establecer vasos comunicantes con los archivos en Latinoamérica y con el resto del mundo. En esta ocasión tendremos la conferencia Der Golem 1915, un trabajo colaborativo de archivos, a cargo de Stefan Droessler. Él es el director del Filmmuseum de Múnich y no solamente tiene ese cargo, sino que ha estado bajo la responsabilidad de muchas restauraciones de importantes películas silentes. Es un agrado presentar a Stefan Droessler porque hace unos años atrás, el 2008, realizamos un proyecto conjunto a partir de una película que se encontró en Chile, Al Gol, que fue restaurada por el Museo del Cine de Múnich, y Stefan estuvo a cargo del proyecto de la edición y de la circulación de este importante material. Esta vez, Stefan nos va a dar una conferencia sobre una importantísima restauración, y por ello queremos también dar a conocer algunos nombres de las cintas que él ha estado encabezando procesos de restauración, entre ellas clásicos del cine de Max Ophuls, Orson Welles, Werner Schröter, Ernst Lubitsch, Richard Oswald y otros. Entonces, como siempre, es necesario aprender de la experiencia de otros y al mismo tiempo estar en contacto, intercambiar ideas, escuchar cómo son los procesos y aprender para poder poner en la práctica ese conocimiento hoy día que contamos en nuestro continente con las tecnologías necesarias para poder llevar a cabo esos procesos. Quizás hace unos años atrás mirábamos con un poco de envidia y admiración lo que ocurría en las cinetecas europeas, que estaban a la vanguardia, ¿no?, de estos procesos de restauración. Hoy con mucho orgullo podemos decir que en América Latina también se producen restauraciones de primer nivel. Por lo tanto, estamos en otra etapa, en otro proceso. Podemos dialogar, podemos compartir experiencias y nos parece fundamental escuchar también la voz de quienes están encabezando proyectos de restauración en archivos europeos y en este caso especial del Museo del Cine de Múnich, con quien nosotros tenemos una larga historia de colaboración y amistad. Bienvenido, Stefan.
So, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to talk about film restoration. And I chose a case of international cooperation, my work on the film Der Golem. Der Golem is one of the German silent films which was very famous in its time, and you can find it mentioned in all the film books and film histories. But when you look a little closer, then you will realize that there are wrong information in some of the books. The books speak about a film Der Golem, silent film Der Golem. Some others mention the title Der Golem, wie er in die Welt kam. And there are even other films with the name Der Golem in it. So the very first thing which we always do when we restore a film is to collect as much information as possible to to know the background about the film. And before we are starting to look for material and finally restore the film. In the case of the Golem, the film, which was always shown for decades after 1945 and was mentioned Der Golem, was in fact the film Der Golem, wie er in die Welt kam. Translated, The Golem as he came into the world. A strange title. And yeah, to understand this title, you have to know the production history. It was, in fact, Paul Wegener, a famous actor of the time, who discovered the new medium film very early in the teens. He was interested in mystery stories because here in film he could tell stories which were not possible to play on stage. So he had the possibility now in the film to duplicate himself. So he did a film like The Student of Prague with a doppelganger, where the shadow of the main actor suddenly has a second life, so the mirror image of the main actor, and you could have him 2 times in the film. And the story of the Golem, he found also fascinating, that there is a figure out of clay who suddenly becomes alive. So he wanted to do a film in 1914, and in fact he filmed Der Golem, a film for which he didn't have enough money for the historical settings which this old legend needed. For doing the film, he was looking for an old town in Germany, and he filmed it finally in Hildesheim and partly in Potsdam, in real architecture. And so he had to change the story of his original idea. Instead of telling an old legend, he now told a story in the present, where the main characters find the fragments of this old golem figure, which survived somehow through many years, and they revive the golem. So with this trick, they were able to do the film. Later, after the war, in 1920, when Wegener was more famous, he got much more money to film Der Golem. And instead of doing a sequel, he decided to do a prequel, now to tell the old legend in historical settings. And to mark this second film was called Der Golem as he came into the world. So we had first the sequel and then the prequel. We should have shown the films in the other order. And as I believe now, since he didn't like the first film, which had this low production budget, it was Wegener himself who tried to collect all the prints of the first film to destroy them so that the people knew only about this big production from 1920. So that is a reason why we have 2 films with the same main actor, with a very similar story of Der Golem, which are mixed up in some of the film books. For many years, the Film Museum Munich tried to restore the famous big film from 1920, Der Golem, wie er in die Welt kam. But we always were interested to see this early film. And there were always rumors that in foreign countries, maybe prints survived, because in Germany, nothing of this film was known to exist except some little fragments, as I will show later. And One of the rumors was that in a collection in Japan, this film existed. So in the 1990s, I went to Japan. I was invited to a tour through Japanese film clubs. I was very happy to have a visit in the Japanese film archive and to find out, is there the original golem somehow surviving? But I was not successful. Later, I heard from the friends of the Japanese film archive, and I had much better and closer relations, that they had in a collection nitrate print, which was completely decomposed and could not be saved. So when finally material turned up in the Museo del Cine in Buenos Aires, only one reel of this film, this was a sensation for me. And I'm very happy that the Museo allowed me to scan their film material, and this was the basis for the film The Golem. So now I would like to switch to my PowerPoint presentation to illustrate a little bit the backgrounds. So here are some images which show us the legend of the golem. Nobody knows exactly where this legend was born. It is in one of these Jewish old books. This idea was that the Rabbi Löw, created an artificial figure and brings it to life. The idea is that this figure is brought to life through words. So you have to have a Shem with some mysterious words on it, and when you put them into the mouth or in the breast of this figure comes out, starts to live. As I said, in the silent era, we find in the German cinema at least 4 silent films, Der Golem. There is the one I spoke about from 1940, and the one from 1920, Der Golem, wie er in die Welt kam, as he came into the world. Between, there's even another film, Der Golem and the Dancer, but this doesn't belong in the row. It is also by Paul Wegener, but this is more a film about film. Wegener is playing an actor in it. It is a kind of comedy where the film star adores a girl and wants to impress the girl, and so he jumps back in the costume of the golem. This film is lost, and it is not a real golem film. And the last film, Alraune and der Golem, is a film which obviously was never shot. But let's go on. I will show you what exists of the films. Der Golem, when it was released in the Berlin cinemas, was a sensational success. This film ran it was during the First World War. Paul Wegener was not able to attend the premiere of the film because he was doing his service in the German army. But nevertheless, the film ran for several weeks in Berlin. The normal running time or the normal running of a film in Berlin was only 1 week. And so the Golem really attracted more than 100,000 people alone in Berlin. Here we have the ads from the contemporary newspapers, and you can see on the right ad, they are already referring to the success in Berlin, and the film came to other towns in Germany. Here we have a quote by Paul Wegener saying that the story of the Golem he knew already as a child, and he liked this story very much. How this rabbi could bring a statue to life with his Shem, with his words, and that he was always fascinated to make a film out of it. Oops. The Golem, this first Golem film was not only shown in Germany. Here we have an ad from an Austrian newspaper. Even the title was a little changed. It was still a German title. Golem, du sollst mein Knecht sein. Golem, you should be my servant, was the title in Austria when the film was shown. We always thought that this German film was only presented in countries which were befriended with Germany during the First World War, so that the film could not be exported to other countries. But we were, as you will see, we were wrong. The film was, during the First World War, also exported to America, which is quite unusual because German films in America during the First World War were not shown normally. Here we have the main actor and the statue which was built. And in the movies, it was easy to exchange between the two. You could stop the camera and put the statue in it. You can see how perfectly it was done, the golem, how perfectly it was modeled. The head was done by a famous sculptor in Germany who had even the copyright on the head of Der Golem. He did other sculptures, always heads, and some of them are still seen in German museums. Here I show you the only existing photos of this comedy about Golem, the Golem and the Dancer. It is a very light comedy. We know a little bit about the content. Maybe one day somewhere print turns up, but so far we have only these pictures. You can see Paul Wegener jumping back in this costume of the Golem and shocking this film fan or this lady he wants to impress because she likes the film Der Golem. And so she is surprised when suddenly the real golem shows up. This film was a short film, so when we look for ads in the newspapers, we find it only mentioned together with other films. Only in Austria, this film was really announced in the advertisement as a main film, but it was only shown for 1 week and then it disappeared. In the old times, most of the films didn't survive. More than 90% of all the German silent films are lost because nobody believed that these films have a value. You could show them only in cinema, and when they were shown in cinema, the films were used and you couldn't make money anymore out of it. There was no television, there was no video, there was no online screening. So a film had a very short life, and the producers didn't keep the prints because the nitrate prints were quite dangerous to catch fire. So they sold them to other companies who melted down these films, and you could get out some silver of it, or you could even use the celluloid to do comps or other pieces, so at least they could make a little money out of the film material. So it is not, if a film is lost, today the people are always shocked that that a German film doesn't exist. I'm more or less shocked when suddenly we hear that one of these films survives, because it is much more normal that the films don't survive. And we were lucky that some of these films were such great successes, like Der Golem, Wir in die Welt kam. This was a big film Paul Wegener did in 1920. And here he hired special artists to have expressionist buildings. He was announcing his own production company, Paul Wegener Monumental Films, and Der Golem, Wir in die Welt kam was supposed to be the first one. We have even stock files of his company, Paul Wegener Film Production, and he always was using the picture of Golem as a trademark for his films. And the artist he hired was the architect Hans Pölzig, who together with his wife Marlene Möschke created a real decoration. Here we have some of his drawings, and here you can see the houses which were built, and they were really built. Here we have a drawing of a human ear, and the main scene in the film is showing a staircase which is modeled like a human ear. Paul Wegener said that his friend Pölzig created a fantasy town. It is not an historical town, it is like a dream, and that his idea was that film is like a dream and has no direct, it is not a picture of reality. So this expressionist style is also reflected in these kind of posters. And here we have the ads from the premiere. It was sold out already very quickly. All the artists and famous people in Berlin attended the screening. Later, this film was also exported to America, quite successful, especially in the Jewish quarters of the big towns. And then we have here a very strange case. The film Alraune and Der Golem. Somebody had the idea that this artificially created golem should meet an artificially created female character, which became famous in Germany because there was a very successful novel by Hans-Heinz Ewers called Alraune. And it is a vamp, a woman who brings bad luck to all the men who love her. And she was created by a professor, by a prostitute, and the sperm of a hanged man. So it is clear that this artificial character brings only bad luck into the world. And we have no idea what the story exactly is about for this film. But there were already posters printed and ads in the magazines. And as you can see, there were already also reports that the film is, that the shooting for this film is starting. And here we have even the picture of the cinematographer Guido Seeber, who was one of the great cinematographers of the time. But the film was never shot. I think there were some copyright issues why they couldn't do it. But today, here is the database of the German cinema. This film is listed. And as we have it now in this internet ages, when something was ever in the internet and you try to erase it and tell the people it didn't exist, this is a fake, somebody saves this information and put it back again. So now we have it in the world that this film exists, which was never shot. And there's also some chaos because in the 20s, after the success of the film, there was even an opera which was performed in all the towns called Der Golem. But it has also the golem story, and but is not connected to a film. Later in the sound era, the theme was brought back. There was the idea to have a sound remake again with Paul Wegener as the main actor. They even signed the contract, but then Hitler came to power and he didn't want to have a film about this Jewish legend, so this project was cancelled. Here we see this is a contract from Hollywood, the Universal horror film series. You know, maybe these films Dracula and Frankenstein and the Werewolf and so on. In this series, they also wanted to do a golem, and they already wrote a script, but it was not produced for not known reasons. Then there was in France a Golem film in the 30s, and parts of it showed up in a horror B picture in Hollywood. And the most interesting idea was some immigrants in the early 40s tried to do an anti-Nazi film in which, in a concentration camp, the Jews create again a golem to free them. But in Hollywood, they didn't find the money to do this film. Going back to the first Golem film, the only things which showed up were in the late 60s, little fragments. And here we have a report by the film restorer of the Bundesarchiv in Germany, who bought, he got for his collection an old film projector with little pieces of film which were in the possession of the owner of this little home film projector. And when he checked these little pieces, he suddenly found out, oh, this is something of this old first Golem film. So this is a report by Helmut Regel from the Bundesarchiv, in which he tells us how two little fragments of the first Golem film were found, more or less by accident, in a collection of little clips of films together with a film projector, which came to the Bundesarchiv, and another very, very little piece in the GDR archive, 1967. And these were the only elements we had of on film of this first Golem, until one reel was found in the Museo del Cinema, I believe in the same shelf like the Metropolis, the long version of Metropolis was found. Here we see the Museo del Cine at the time when this Metropolis was found. I was a short time later in Buenos Aires because we were preparing the FIAF Congress, and I was glad to go to the Museo del Cine. And of course, I asked, do you have more German films? It was such a surprise that this long version of Metropolis was there. And we looked through all the cans, but there was nothing. And it was much later that a film critic from Buenos Aires told me that in this collection was another German film, this one reel of Der Golem. It had a different title. The point was that the film title on the reel was The Monster of Fate. And I didn't know about this story, that the old first Golem film during the First World War was sold to America. Nobody wanted to see German films in America, so they gave this English title and said it is a film from Czechoslovakia, because some of the actors in this movie came from Czechoslovakia. And of this American version, one reel came to Buenos Aires and was printed on 60 millimeter because the original nitrate was decomposing. And so in quite bad image quality, we had a reel, the second reel of this film, with English titles. At least it is a central part of the film. But in the collection of the Deutsche Filmmuseum in Frankfurt, we also found two different versions from two different collections of the original screenplay. It was the copy of Lyda Salmonova, the main actress of the film, her personal screenplay. So we even have little remarks on this screenplay, which scene was shot, and we had a screenplay in the collection of Paul Wegener, who was the husband of Lydia Salmonova, with very slight little differences. So from this screenplay, we can have a very, especially since there are these marks that we can see which shot was really filmed, we had a very precise knowledge how the whole film should look like. And we had also in the Frankfurt collection some original photos. Oh no, not only in the Frankfurt collection, also in the Deutsche Kinemathek in Berlin. We had a few original photos from the film. And this was a way how we started to reconstruct the film. The Munich Filmmuseum is quite known since the 1970s to collect films and to do reconstructions. I use the word reconstruction because today we use the word restoration too much in the technical sense. When you digitize a film and bring it to a digital studio, they always say they restored the film. And when you buy a DVD, you can hardly get a DVD of a film which is not promoted to be restored. What we are doing is more or less to reconstruct the films. In fact, it was Enno Patalas, my predecessor at the Film Museum, when he in the early 70s became the director of Munich Filmmuseum. He was so angry that many famous German silent films existed in much shorter versions than he found in the documents of the 20s. And he was so sad about the condition of the prints. So he started, in the case of Metropolis or of Nosferatu, to name two of the most known titles, to ask for prints. Fortunately, of these famous titles, many prints survived in different collections. And he compared the prints and found out that in the one print, there was here a shot more, or the other was a longer shot. Some of the original prints had colors, but only black and white prints were known of these titles. And so, like in a puzzle, he put the films together. This is today quite common when you restore a silent film from different sources, with material from different sources, then you compare it and try somehow to puzzle the film together. And this puzzling was exactly the work we had to do with the Golem. Here I can show you of the Golem from 1920, how the work was done. It is a famous film where you had different prints in the different archives and could try to combine it. There's even a book which describes in German this early work Enno Patalas was doing in the 80s. Here they did a schedule and tried to understand the genesis or the way of the prints they found. You can see they had a print in New York, in Moscow, in Milano, and they found out that this nitrate print was copied in London. Then the British Film Institute had a print, and they did a copy from their print and gave it to Vienna. And so on. So this was very important when you had different materials to find out which material is from which original print, even to trace it back to the best material, the original nitrate. And when we are lucky and it survives, then we can get out the best image quality. And then they did an exact list with numbering all the shots and listing it in the different prints to measure it, to write down the damages or the lines or the lengths especially of the shots. In the case of this Golem wie in die Welt kam, they didn't know the German original titles, but there was even a novel published based on the film. And in this novel, they found the text and could identify it that these were the original German wordings, because most of the print came from foreign countries and had intertitles in the language of these countries. And these intertitles were not always authentic translations. Some of the distribution companies just changed the wording in the translation and tried to make the film more sensational. So they translated from the prints here on the very left, from the Russian print. They wrote down the intertitles, they compared them, then they looked in the novel and decided what were the most likely original titles. In the very end, they even found this censorship document. All the German films, fortunately, we have to say today as historians, had to pass the censorship, which is normally not such a good thing because the censors cut the films. But the good thing on the censors is that they document what they are doing and the films. And in Germany, it was quite common when a film came to the censors, they listed all the intertitles, everything you could write down, everything which was written in the film was documented, and we had these censorship cards where you can see reel 1, title number 1, and these were the original wordings. And even in the end, we have the exact meter lengths of each reel. And this helps us today a lot when we want to restore the film. Then in Italy, they suddenly found even tinted prints. So suddenly we had information that the film was also colored. The most interesting thing of the second Golem film was that we found in the Russian print a few of the original German intertitles. So we could even compare with the censorship that the wording was always correct. But these writing style or these letters were hand painted and in a very irregular, more expressionist way. Now with digital means, we scanned all these existing titles and we recreated an alphabet. So now we could write in this style all the missing titles. Here you can see one of the original titles and how we can recreate the title because we have the whole alphabet. The very first restoration of the second Golem, we just had a neutral letter type. But now, when we had scanned and created the whole original letters, then we can recreate much better the intertitles. And when we were working in digital studio, as we do nowadays, we scan the elements and then all the work is done on the computer. This is Christian Ketels, one of the editors I work with on many projects. And when we compare the prints, here you can see they have different tints. And we even found out that there were, in the case of Golem, different negatives. So in Germany, it started already in the teens when a film was a big production and they wanted to export it to other countries. Then they created two negatives, one for the domestic distribution and Europe, and a second negative, which they could send to America so that the film could be distributed at the same time in this country. And there were independent distributors to do as many prints as they needed. And to have two negatives they just took the shots in the editing room, the best one for the A negative and the second best one for the B negative. And when we try to restore a film, this is another complication, that we want to try to have the A version with shots from the A negative. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes we have even to mix it. In the case of Der Golem, Wir in die Welt kam, we had the original camera negative partly only from the A negative, and we had to add shots from the B negative to get the film complete. Here you can see different ways of restoration. On the very left, this is the old restoration from the 90s. On the right, it is a restoration from the 2000 years, still not the original negative, which was not known to exist at the time. But you can see that in this analog copying, the pictures were much darker and you got lost. The resolution was not so good and you lost a lot of details. Here, this was a nitrate print from the Cineteca in Milano, which gave us the original colors. The colors which you saw before were recreated by the Cineteca di Bologna at their lab. And this is original film material of the old times. And it is quite amazing. When you look the colors at the perforation hole, here we have a clear green, but in the center. But in the image, in the center of the image, this green is more looking like yellow. So the question is even, is this color fading, and which color we take as a reference? Here you have just an idea how the intertitles looked in these original prints. They were quite different from the original letter type, as I have shown before. And here is another famous shot from Der Golem. On the top, on the left, this green image was created in Bologna based on the green which they found in this Italian print. So they thought that this green is very similar to the screen as the green on the bottom. I think there's a big difference in the green. And I think that in the original you can even see the moon and you have much more grace to see, while in this duplication in the analog time, a lot of details got lost. And here on the top, on the right side, we have an attempt to have it tinted and toned, but still not going back to the original. But when you see these different images, you have an idea when you restore or reconstruct a film, what you can do with it, what are the possibilities, what can be done, and how difficult it is to find the original way, the most authentic way, as we should look for as film restorers. When I do a film restoration, I always put the personal names of the people involved in the restoration and reconstruction in the end of the film, because I believe that every digitization or restoration which is done is a personal interpretation. There is no objective restoration possible. You always have to interpret it. And for me, it is important to know that there are people behind it who do the decisions. Here again, a shot from the analog restoration from the 90s, which was interpreted to be a rosé, because in the original, on the bottom, you see between the perforation hole a kind of rosé, but in the middle of the image, it looks more like a brown. And what you also can see that this analog restoration zoomed into the picture. It changed even the shot. When you look at the head of Rabbi Löw, you can see the full head in the original image, and here it is cut. The top of the head is not present anymore. Here we have another example, and you can see in the original, in the nitrate original, you can see really even the face of the golem. In the later old-time duplication, you can hardly see anything in the face. And here another thing happens, that in the analog restoration, even the image is compressed somehow, because in the analog way, I don't know what really happened in it, but the image really has changed. This is the opening sequence, and they tinted it blue because of the color between the perforation hole, and look in the image on the right side, which has much more depth and looks very different. Same here. Well, I don't want to go too much in detail. This restoration we just finished, and the amazing thing which we found in the very end is the original soundtrack at the time. Oh, let me see. At the time, it was done for big orchestra, and it got separate reviews because his music was so famous, was so overwhelming that now in the newspapers there was a film critic to write a review of the film. There was a music critic who wrote a review about the score, and this score was lost, and we finally found this score, and this gave us a perfect timeline for which we could restore the film. Even we had suddenly knew the speed of the film in the silent era. The films were, it's always another mystery, how fast were they projected? Not always in slow motion, so that the movements were real. Sometimes they were a little faster and like this. But with the help of the music, we could find it. Here's the last images I have is an American print from the negative, from the original negative, where the composer completely re-edited the film, created beautiful but totally invented new titles. And these were the ads of the second Golem film, the Golem as he came into the world, now having only the title Der Golem, like the old film, which in America was shown as a monster of fate, and the film was more or less distributed as a horror film. Yeah, and in the end, I can show you what we did with the Golem. For me, it is very important to have a good music when I have such a restoration, which is only being in fragments. So there are a lot of holes, and to get it somehow in a timeline, in a rhythm, I need a really good music which fills the gaps and gives us the impression, a continuity of the film. So here we have the final restoration. Our restorations always start with an explanation title card, informing the audience about the background of the film. Here it is said that they see a reconstruction based on little fragments on the screenplay, on photos, and on the one real 60mm print from the Museo del Cine in Buenos Aires. And it even mentions that it was Fernando Martin Peña who identified the reel. The original titles are recreated by us. We use the letter type of of other films from the same production company, we also know that they were tinted in red. So these are recreated, but in a quite authentic way. The first reel, we don't have any material except some photos. So we explain the storyline, that there are workers digging in a field and finding a kind of treasure with old Jewish things, and especially with a statue of the golem. So they bring all the elements, all the things they found to a Jewish dealer who gives them a little money, including to the golem statue. He says that the golem statue has no value, but that he gives some coins to the workers, and the workers disappear. Then the dealer takes his daughter and is happy with her about the new things he just got, and the two are doing a dance. These are the the elements of the story in the first reel. We have only these few photos, but here now in the second reel, we have the 60mm film material from Buenos Aires. It is not in good quality, so we tried everything with a scan to get the best quality out. It's done in high resolution, but there is not more in the 60mm print. Nevertheless, we can see the town. We see a student who is specialized in old magic things, but he needs some money. So he goes also to the dealer of antiques and offers him some of his books. You see here we have the buildings from Hildesheim. Wegener would have loved to have an architect and to build really houses, but they had to use the common ones which they found. So we tried everything that at least you can read the sign on the building, Antiquitäten, on the house of the dealer. The tinting we took from the 60mm print. When we scanned it, it had this yellow, this violet color. And the old dealer discovers in the book a drawing of the golem. The music you can hear, the score, was composed by Sabrina Zimmermann for grand piano and violin. Sabrina is specialized in Jewish music and Russian music, and I think she did a great work. It is very important that when you have such fragments, that the music connects the different elements and gives you an atmosphere which the film needs. This is an insert we created. We don't know the letter type, but we chose old German letters because this is now a page in the book where the dealer suddenly reads about the old story of the golem and how the rabbi brought this statue to life. And here is written that nobody knows what happened to the golem when in the old times nobody knows where the statue was left and if the statue survived. But here our dealer has a statue and brings them in front of the camera. And here the book says, these are the famous words which bring the statue to life. So the dealer has something which he can use as a gem and put into the breast of the golem. And here he cuts out the words from the book, these magical words. And here we have a very interesting shot. The Jewish dealer comes to the camera. It's all one shot without a cut. Putting the words into the gem. And then he goes back to the golem and puts the gem into the breast of the golem. So this is an amazing shot because you have it from a wide shot to a close-up and then again to a wide shot without a cut. But we know from the shooting documents, the idea behind it was, in the moment when the close-up is, they exchanged the statue in the background. Now it is the actor. So now he can come to life. So it is an interesting shot, just done to have the trick and to exchange the two golems. And now when the golem awakes and is doing the first movements, the music is playing the golem scene from the score of the second golem film. So now I jump. The title says, "He will be my servant." Now I jump to a later part of the movie, just to show you a piece. There is a party, and the golem breaks in. It's a castle where the party takes place. I show you this because here you can see the deterioration of nitrate film material, and it has a solarization effect. Yeah, it is the fifth reel. And fortunately it was saved on safety film, but already the deterioration of the nitrate material let us see only hardly what happens. But since in this context, here you see the golem looking through the window, and these are the people of the party. When the golem breaks in, we know from the shooting reports that it was a dangerous scene, that Paul Wegener nearly hurted himself. But now in the context of the storyline, we can even use such material to illustrate a little bit what is happening. So the audience can now accept it in the context. So here's a golem, somebody tries to kill the golem, and you see here a knife sticking in the breast of the golem. And here we have again a little fragment. People are fleeing the golem into the garden. And also the young lady from the beginning of the film with her lover, and the golem is following. So, and of course, the final scene takes place on a tower. It's quite dramatic. But we stop it here. I'll show you the very end of the film. Here is the end title. And then in our restoration, we of course always list who did the reconstruction, which material was used from which sources. And who were the people behind it, who had the concept for this kind of restoration, who scanned the film and restored the images, who played the music, who recorded the music, so that you can see it is a subjective interpretation of the film, just to give you an impression how the film looked like. So I hope that one day you will be able to see the two Golem films were restored in a festival or on any occasion, in an archival cinema or wherever it will be possible, with this recorded original music or even with a live performance of this original music. For us, it was a very long work. We worked on the restoration of the Golem films about 6 years in the final stage. And you have to see these 20 years of research to have the former versions of the Golem via and Die Welt kam. I think that restoration work never ends. And the moment when we find a new photo of the first Golem or another reel or another little piece, then we will start again and try to put it in. And maybe we have even to change some of the title cards because we were not precise enough. We learn more. So for me, all these projects, all the restorations we are doing are living projects which need progress and where we or maybe somebody else in the future will try to come as close as possible with new means, new material to the original version when the film was premiered. This is a goal we want to get, and we know that we will never get it. Well, thank you very much.